Nadine Carter had spent her life building an empire. Carter Luxe, a brand synonymous with elegance, ambition, and exclusivity. She was a woman who turned every obstacle into opportunity, whose name commanded respect in boardrooms and red carpet events alike. But on the night of her company's most celebrated event, the very world she had created turned its back on her. Standing at the entrance of her flagship store, dressed in a custom gown worth more than most people's yearly salary, she was stopped cold by two security guards who didn't recognize her. "Ma'am, step aside," one of them said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm Nadine Carter," she replied, her tone calm but firm. The guard smirked. "Sure you are. No invitation, no entry." Humiliated, Nadine watched as VIP guests breezed past her, some casting curious glances, others deliberately looking away. The whispers started almost immediately. For a moment, she felt like she was back at the bottom, before the power, the money, and the success. Before she had proven herself 100 times over. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a message. Nadine's humiliation became a headline overnight, her story igniting a firestorm of public outrage. But behind the scenes, the incident revealed cracks in her company's foundation, and in her own sense of control. Now she had to decide, would she quietly move on to protect her brand, or would she risk everything to expose the deep-seated biases that had allowed this to happen? In a world that refused to fully see her, Nadine Carter was about to make sure she could never be ignored again. While you're here, make sure to subscribe to Stories for You for more stories that inspire, connect, and challenge us. Nadine Carter walked through the glass doors of her New York flagship store, her heels clicking against the marble floors, the sound echoing across the grand space. It was the night of her annual VIP event, and the room was filled with high-profile guests, designers, and fashion journalists, all here to celebrate the success of Carter Luxe, her billion-dollar fashion empire. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the glamorous guests sipping champagne, dressed in the finest pieces from her latest collection. This was her moment, a testament to her years of hard work, sacrifice, and relentless drive. She'd built Carter Luxe from scratch, turning it into one of the most sought-after luxury brands in the world. But tonight, it felt different. There was a tension in the air, something she couldn't quite place. As she made her way to the front of the store to greet a few industry friends, she saw two unfamiliar faces at the entrance. New security guards, judging by their uniforms. They were tall, muscular men with stiff postures and the kind of overly serious expressions that suggested they were taking their jobs far too seriously. Nadine approached the entrance, her assistant Amanda close behind, when one of the guards stepped directly into her path, blocking her way. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone firm. "This area is restricted. You'll need an invitation to enter." Nadine raised an eyebrow. She wasn't used to being questioned in her own store, much less by someone she had hired. She smiled politely, assuming he was new. "I don't think there's been a mistake. I'm Nadine Carter." The guard didn't budge. "I don't care who you are, ma'am. No invitation, no entry." Amanda stepped forward, alarmed. This is her store. She's the CEO of this entire company. The guard narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. "If you don't have credentials, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Heat surged in Nadine's chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you serious right now? I'm the owner of Carter Luxe. This is my event." But the second guard, a younger man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "We've been given strict instructions not to let anyone in without the proper credentials. So please, ma'am, step aside." By now, a few guests were beginning to glance over, whispering to one another. Nadine's face burned with humiliation as the guards continued to block her, their expressions indifferent, as if she were some random woman trying to crash the event. Amanda fumbled through her bag, searching for a way to defuse the situation, but before she could produce her ID, Nadine's head of security, Marcus, rushed over. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus barked, his face flushed. Do you two idiots know who this is? The guards exchanged uneasy glances before stepping aside, but the damage was already done. Nadine felt exposed, humiliated in front of her peers and her clients. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice low but trembling with rage. "We'll talk about this later." As she walked past the guards, the champagne glasses and laughter from the guests felt distant, the once glamorous event now tainted with a sour taste of embarrassment. Later that evening, after the event had wound down and the last of the guests had left, Nadine retreated to her private office in the flagship store. The luxurious space, decorated with sleek black leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and her company's signature gold accents, usually felt like a sanctuary. Tonight, it felt suffocating. Amanda hovered by the door, her face lined with worry. She held Nadine's coat draped over her arm but hadn't dared to speak since the incident. "Sit," Nadine said finally, her voice sharp but not cruel. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Amanda obeyed, folding herself into the chair as Nadine paced the room. "I cannot believe this happened. At my own event. Amanda, how does this even happen?" Amanda fidgeted nervously. I don't know. Those guards were new. Marcus hired them a few weeks ago. I don't think they didn't recognize me?" Nadine interrupted, spinning to face her assistant. Her tone was incredulous. "Does my picture not hang in every damn boardroom in this company? Am I not the face of Carter Lux?" Amanda's silence was answer enough. Nadine sighed, sinking into her chair. She pinched the bridge of her nose, willing the rage and humiliation to subside. She couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. "Call Marcus," she said finally. "I want him here. Now." Amanda hesitated. "It's late, Nadine. He might not." "I don't care," Nadine snapped, cutting her off. "I don't care if it's midnight, if it's inconvenient, if it's the middle of his damn vacation. He's the head of security, and this is his problem. Call him." Amanda nodded and stepped out of the room, leaving Nadine alone with her thoughts. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. The humiliation of the evening replayed in her mind. The guards' dismissive expressions, the murmurs of the onlookers, the sinking realization that in her own empire, she had been treated like a stranger. It wasn't just about the mistake, it was about what it represented. Would this have happened to one of her male counterparts? To a white CEO? Or had those guards seen her, her skin, her gender, and immediately decided she didn't belong? A knock at the door broke her reverie. Amanda poked her head in. "Marcus is on his way." "Good," Nadine said flatly. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, looking harried and out of breath. He still wore his suit from the event, his tie loosened and his face shiny with sweat. "Nadine," he began, stepping into her office. "Amanda said you needed to see me. Is everything okay? Does everything look okay to you?" Nadine shot back, her voice cold. Marcus flinched but recovered quickly. "I heard there was some kind of issue with the new guards. I was going to—" "Some kind of issue?" Nadine interrupted, standing to her full height and leaning over the desk. "I was humiliated in front of my guests tonight, Marcus. I was denied entry to my own event by 2 security guards you hired. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Marcus held up his hands defensively. "I'm sorry, Nadine. I take full responsibility. Those guys are new, and they clearly didn't recognize you. It was an honest mistake." "An honest mistake?" Nadine repeated, her voice rising. "Do you think this would have happened to someone else in my position? Do you think a white male CEO would have been stopped at the door like that?" Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Nadine didn't let him. "They didn't just stop me," she continued. "They spoke to me like I was a trespasser, like I didn't belong. Do you understand how insulting that is?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I understand, and I'm deeply sorry. I'll make sure they're reprimanded." "Reprimanded?" Nadine's laughter was bitter. No. You'll make sure they're gone. They don't deserve a place in this company. Not after tonight. Marcus hesitated. Nadine, firing them might make this situation look worse. If the media gets wind of it, they'll spin it as you being too harsh. Let them spin, Nadine said sharply. This isn't just about me. It's about the culture in this company. If my own employees can't recognize me or respect me, what message does that send to the world? Marcus nodded reluctantly. Understood. I'll take care of it. Nadine sat back down, exhaling slowly. And Marcus? Yes. Fix your hiring process, she said. Because the next time something like this happens, it won't just be the guards losing their jobs. By the following morning, the incident had already made its way into the headlines. Black CEO humiliated at her own event by security guards. Read one headline. Racial profiling or honest mistake. The Carter Lux incident sparks debate. Read another. Nadine stared at her phone, the words blurring together as she scrolled through articles and social media posts. The story had gone viral overnight, and the public reaction was as divided as she'd feared. Some people expressed outrage, calling for accountability and pointing to systemic racism as the root cause of the incident. Others dismissed it as a misunderstanding, accusing Nadine of overreacting. She tossed her phone onto the desk, frustrated. She hadn't wanted this to become a public spectacle, but the damage was done. A soft knock at the door broke her train of thought. Amanda stepped in, holding a tablet. You're trending, she said carefully. It's a lot. I know, Nadine replied wearily. Amanda hesitated. The board wants to meet. They're concerned about the press and how it's affecting the brand. Of course they are, Nadine muttered. They don't care about what happened to me. They only care about their bottom line. Amanda gave her a sympathetic look. What are you going to do? Nadine straightened, her resolve hardening. I'm going to tell the truth. And if the board doesn't like it, that's their problem. Nadine sat at the head of the long, gleaming conference table in the executive suite of Carter Lux's headquarters. Across from her, 12 board members sat in their impeccably tailored suits, their expressions varying between concern and impatience. The tension in the room was palpable, and Nadine could feel the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on her. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, Nadine began, her voice calm but firm. The chair of the board, a silver-haired man named James Waverly, folded his hands neatly in front of him. Of course, Nadine. We're all here because we share the same goal. Protecting the brand. Nadine's jaw tightened. Protecting the brand should start with protecting the people who lead it. What happened to me at the event wasn't just an unfortunate incident. It was an embarrassment to this company and a reflection of a deeper problem. James raised an eyebrow. We've read the reports, and while we understand this was upsetting, we believe the media has blown it out of proportion. Our focus should be on mitigating the damage and moving forward. Mitigating the damage? Nadine repeated, her voice rising slightly. This isn't just about PR, James. This is about how a company I built, a company that bears my name, allowed its own leader to be disrespected and humiliated. If this can happen to me, what does that say about how we treat our employees or customers who don't look like the typical face of luxury? Another board member, Lydia Cho, interjected. We all sympathize with what you went through, Nadine. But we're concerned about how publicizing this further might alienate investors. Our client base is diverse, but many of our top buyers and stakeholders expect discretion and professionalism, not controversy. Nadine's hands gripped the edge of the table. So you're saying I should stay silent? Pretend this never happened? We're saying, James cut in smoothly, that the narrative needs to focus on resolution, not conflict. A public statement from you, acknowledging the incident as a misunderstanding and expressing your faith in the company's commitment to diversity, could help quell the backlash. Nadine's laugh was bitter. A misunderstanding? Is that what you're calling racial profiling now? The room fell silent. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances, while others avoided her gaze entirely. "I'm not here to downplay what happened," Nadine continued. "I'm here to address it head-on. This company needs to take responsibility, not just for what happened to me, but for the culture that allowed it to happen." James sighed. "And what exactly do you propose?" Nadine leaned forward, meeting James's gaze directly. "First, those guards are gone. Effective immediately. Their behavior reflects poorly on this company and cannot go unaddressed." "That's already in motion," Lydia said. "Marcus informed us this morning." "Good," Nadine said. "Second, we're conducting a full audit of our hiring and training practices, especially for positions like security and customer-facing roles. Everyone in this company, from top to bottom, needs to understand implicit bias and how it impacts their actions." James frowned. "An audit? Do you know how disruptive that could be?" "Yes, I do," Nadine said. "And I also know it's necessary. Our brand is built on inclusivity and empowerment. If we can't live up to those values internally, then everything we stand for is a lie." The room erupted into murmurs. One board member, an older woman named Deborah Vaughn, finally spoke up. "I think Nadine is right. Ignoring this won't solve anything. If anything, transparency and accountability could strengthen our brand." "Thank you, Deborah," Nadine said, giving her a small nod. James sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "And I suppose you have a third demand?" "I do," Nadine said. She stood, her voice firm and unyielding. "I'm going public with my story." A collective gasp filled the room. "Nadine," Lydia said, her tone almost pleading, "think about what you're saying. A public statement from the CEO about racial profiling within her own company? It could tank investor confidence. Or," Nadine countered, "it could send a powerful message that we're serious about change. This isn't just about me. It's about every person of color who walks into one of our stores and wonders if they'll be treated like they belong. It's about setting a standard for the industry." James shook his head. "This is risky, Nadine. Very risky." "And so is staying silent," Nadine said. "But if you think I'm going to let this slide, if you think I'm going to sit here and let this company brush what happened under the rug, you don't know me at all." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over the board like a heavy blanket. A week later, Nadine stood at a podium in front of a packed press conference. Reporters from major news outlets filled the room, their cameras trained on her as she prepared to speak. Behind her, a large banner bore the Carter Lux logo, flanked by the words transparency, accountability, change. Nadine took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of the podium. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "As many of you know, an incident occurred at a recent Carter Lux event that brought to light some serious issues within our company. Today, I want to address those issues, not as a CEO trying to protect a brand, but as a black woman who has faced the reality of bias and discrimination, even in spaces I've worked hard to build." The room was silent, the reporters hanging on her every word. What happened to me at that event wasn't just a personal humiliation. It was a reflection of a larger problem, one that exists not just in this company but in society as a whole. It's a problem of perception, of assumptions, of who we believe belongs and who we believe doesn't. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. At Carter Lux, we pride ourselves on being a brand that stands for inclusivity, empowerment, and breaking barriers. But recent events have shown me that we need to do more to live up to those values. That's why, starting today, we're implementing a comprehensive plan to address bias within our company, through training, audits, and accountability at every level. Nadine's voice grew stronger as she continued. "This isn't just about me. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels seen, respected, and valued, whether they're a customer, an employee, or a leader. And it's about sending a message to the industry that inclusivity isn't just a slogan. It's a commitment." When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Nadine stood tall, her chin high, as she faced the cameras. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since the incident, she felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for something bigger. The morning after Nadine's press conference, the world buzzed with reactions to her bold, public stance. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #StandWithNadine and #AccountabilityInLuxury, while major news outlets dissected every word of her statement. In the boardroom of Carter Luxe, however, the atmosphere was far less celebratory. Nadine sat at the head of the table, scanning the room of somber-faced executives. James Waverley, the board chair, sat opposite her, his expression unreadable. "Well," James began, leaning back in his chair, "that was certainly a statement." "Yes, it was," Nadine replied evenly. "And it was necessary." "I'm not saying it wasn't," James said carefully. "But the markets don't always respond to what's necessary. They respond to stability, and your statement, while heartfelt, may have shaken investor confidence." Nadine narrowed her eyes. "If investors are rattled by me addressing systemic racism and bias within our company, perhaps they're not the kind of investors we want." A younger executive, Carla Dunn, raised her hand tentatively. "Actually, Nadine, there's been some positive movement too. Several prominent figures in the fashion industry have publicly supported your statement. Anna Kingsley of Style Weekly called it a watershed moment for corporate accountability in luxury brands. And some of our customers have even said they feel more connected to Carter Luxe because of your transparency." James frowned but said nothing. Nadine nodded at Carla. "Thank you. That's the direction we should be focusing on. This isn't just about damage control. It's about building something better." "We'll see how the numbers play out," James muttered. Nadine turned her attention back to the room. "In the meantime, I want updates on the internal audit, and I want our diversity and inclusion training to begin as soon as possible. We're not just making promises. We're following through." Not everyone within Carter Luxe shared Nadine's vision. The press conference had sparked heated conversations among employees, from the top executives to the retail workers on the ground. In the break room of the flagship store, a group of sales associates debated the company's new direction. "I think what Nadine's doing is brave," said Jasmine, a young black woman who had worked at the store for 2 years. "She's standing up for what's right, and she's showing that even CEOs aren't untouchable." "But do you think it's good for business?" countered Peter, a white associate who'd been with the company for a decade. "I mean, all this talk about bias training and audits, it feels like overkill. Most of us treat customers the same no matter who they are." Jasmine scoffed. "Do you? Or do you just not notice when you don't?" The room fell quiet. Meanwhile, in the corporate office, the tension was no less palpable. Some employees rallied behind Nadine, seeing her as a trailblazer for justice, while others grumbled privately, accusing her of making the company's problems about herself. "It's a slippery slope," one executive muttered to another in the elevator. "First, it's security guards. Next, it's HR policies, promotions. It's like she's trying to rewrite the entire culture overnight." "Maybe it needs to be rewritten," the other replied, before stepping off the elevator. As Nadine threw herself into the work of reforming Carter Luxe, her personal life began to fray at the edges. Long days at the office and the constant scrutiny of the media left her little time for herself. One evening, as she sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking the city, her phone buzzed with a call from her mother. "Hey, Mama," Nadine said, leaning back on the couch. "Baby, you sound tired," her mother said, concern evident in her voice. "You've been all over the news lately. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Nadine replied automatically. "Don't lie to me," her mother said gently. "I know that tone. You're carrying too much, aren't you?" Nadine sighed, her defenses slipping. "It's just a lot. The press, the board, the employees. I feel like I'm fighting battles on all sides." Her mother paused, then said, "You've always been a fighter, Nadine. But even fighters need rest. Don't lose yourself in this fight, baby. Remember why you started it." Nadine closed her eyes. letting her mother's words sink in. She had started this fight not just for herself but for every person who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or disrespected. But the weight of the battle was heavier than she'd anticipated. A week after her press conference, Nadine received an invitation to speak at a high-profile panel on diversity in corporate leadership. The event, hosted by a prominent civil rights organization, was set to feature CEOs and activists discussing the intersection of business and social justice. Nadine hesitated. While she was no stranger to public speaking, the thought of exposing herself to further scrutiny made her stomach churn. Amanda, her assistant, noticed her hesitation. "This could be a great opportunity to show people what Carter Lux stands for," she said. "And what you stand for." Nadine nodded slowly. "You're right. It's just hard putting myself out there again." "You're not just putting yourself out there," Amanda said. "You're leading, and people need to see that." At the event, Nadine's speech was met with a standing ovation. She spoke candidly about the challenges she'd faced, the reforms underway at Carter Lux, and her vision for a more inclusive industry. Her words resonated with the audience, solidifying her position as a trailblazer not just in fashion but in corporate leadership. Months later, the internal audit at Carter Lux was complete, and the results were sobering. The report revealed significant gaps in diversity at all levels of the company, as well as numerous accounts of microaggressions and bias in hiring and promotions. Nadine presented the findings to the board, along with a comprehensive plan to address them. A new mentorship program to support employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Regular diversity and inclusion training for all employees, including leadership. Clear pathways for advancement to ensure equal opportunities for everyone. The board approved the plan, though not without reservations. Nadine knew the road ahead would be long, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, the company's sales began to recover, buoyed by the loyalty of customers who admired Nadine's honesty and commitment to change. In her personal life, Nadine found moments of peace. She reconnected with old friends, took up painting as a way to unwind, and began to see a therapist who helped her navigate the emotional toll of the past few months. For the first time in a long time, she felt balanced, not just as a CEO, but as a person. A year after the incident, Nadine stood in the same flagship store where it had all begun. This time, she wasn't there for an event or a press conference. She was there to greet a group of young black entrepreneurs who had been selected for a mentorship program funded by Carter Lux. As she looked around the room, Nadine felt a swell of pride. The pain and humiliation of that night had transformed into something powerful, a legacy of accountability, empowerment, and change. She had turned a moment of invisibility into a movement of recognition. And she wasn't done yet. If you felt inspired, emotionally attached, or connected with the story, comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for watching.